Greetings and welcome back to room 303 in our chats with Emily, as we are calling our readings through the poetry of Emily Dickinson. We are using the Johnson edition, and we turn now to poem 479. She dealt her pretty words like blades. What an amazing first line. Now, of course, the question is, who is the she? And many speculate that Emily is actually talking about her friend, some have called lover, Sue Gilbert, of course marrying ultimately her brother Austin. Now this poem takes us back to 299, and it is another poem about relationships. An observer of Sue once commented, quote, "Sue loved to get her little poniard in," little sword, little knife. And it's fairly clear that Emily in this poem is talking about the pain that she felt from Sue. It's also obviously talking about the relationship. You guys remember when we did 446, I showed her heights she never knew. Woods climb, I said. She said, not so. With me, I said, with me. I showed her secrets, morning's nest, the rope the nights were put across. And now, wouldst have me for a guest? She would not find her yes. And then I break my life, and lo, a light for her did solemn glow, the larger as her face withdrew, and could she further know? The scholar Johnson, by the way, points out that after the writing of this poem, that Emily would live the next 10 years of her life and not walk the 100 yards across the green to, in fact, see Sue. So clearly, this is maybe, in some ways, the genesis of a ruptured relationship. More than any poet, Emily, I think, understands the power of words. And maybe we would say the destructive power of words. Is this the beginnings of Emily's complete withdrawal from society? It's possible. This is what she says about, we will assume, Sue. She dealt her pretty words like blades, how glittering they shone, and every one unbarred a nerve or wantoned with a bone. She never deemed she hurt, that is not steel's affair, a vulgar grimace in the flesh, how ill the creatures bear. To ache is human, not polite, the film upon the eye, mortality's old custom, just locking up to die. I think it is significant that the last word of this poem is die. I think it is significant that she begins with a word like pretty to describe the words that are then the simile, like blades. And of course, I mean, immediately you can think about blades as in knives, as in blades of grass, right? And notice she said her words were glittering, and they were showy, in other words. They shone. Every one unbarred a nerve. Now this notion of kind of transposing or showing or cutting to the bone or cutting to the nerve, as she'll use bone in the next line, wanted with a bone, suggests what? There are people who have the ability to speak words that are so cutting. And she says, whoever the she is of this poem, again, we'll assume it's Sue, had that ability, and it just kind of cut deep. By the way, we should point out that Emily herself, many scholars have pointed out, that Emily herself was capable of the same kind of thing at times. She could speak some pretty direct words as well. Is it possible that she's talking about herself in this poem? Some have said possibly, but probably not. She never deemed she hurt. In other words, she said these words, but never realized the pain that she was calling. Why? Because that's not steel's affair, and that tells us that the blades here are actually steel and not blades of grass, right? And then she'll use this phrase, a vulgar grimace in the flesh, how ill the creatures bear. By the way, the only time in all her poetry that she uses the word grimace is here. And I think it's the key word of the poem. To ache is human, she points out. Now, notice the shift is away from the speaker with the blades of words now to herself. To ache is human, not polite. The film upon the eye. Can't help but think about Song of Myself, Whitman's Song of Myself, passage 46, where he says, we must have it ourselves to the dazzle of our life. He says that I wipe the gum from your eyes. To ache is human, not polite. The film upon the eye, mortality's old custom, just locking up to die. All Emily can do, in other words, is to what? Close her eyes and die quietly, or to watch a relationship die quietly. At 2A, I think that's her point. Words can bring health, but they can also bring harm. And then I think another message is it's really sad when relationships are damaged or destroyed by words. At 2B, well, the vague antecedent is obviously the point here, right? I mean, who is Sue actually talking about? The scholar Johnson has suggested that maybe Emily got this idea of the blades from a epigraph of chapter 6 of George Eliot's Middlemarch. And she said it this way: "My lady's tongue is like the meadow blades that cut you, stroking them with idle hand." I think it's very possible. Hey, do you guys remember when we did Alice Walker's Everyday Use? Remember what Mama says, the narrator Mama says about Dee? She says, in regards to the sisters, "I used to think Dee hated Maggie too, but that was before we raised the money, the church and me, to send her to Augusta to school. She used to read to us without pity, forcing words, lies, other people's habits, whole lives upon us too, sitting trapped and ignorant underneath her voice. She washed us in a river of make-believe, burned us with a lot of knowledge we didn't necessarily need to know, pressed us to her with the serious way she read to shove us away at just the moment, like dimwits we seemed about to understand." I think it's a brilliant insight. When we get to poem 1219, we're a ways away from it, but when we get there, we'll come back to this idea of Emily and Sue. "Now I knew I lost her. Not that she was gone, but remoteness traveled on her face and tongue. Alien though adjoining, as a foreign race, traversed she, though pausing, latitudinous place. Elements unaltered, universe the same, but love's transmigration, somehow this had come. Henceforth to remember nature took the day. I had paid so much for his is penury, not who toils for freedom or for family, but the restitution of idolatry." And I think in this regards, we're going to see more of this notion that words have tremendous power to obviously damage as well as to heal. Finally, at 3A, to own a poem like this, what was a time when you were cut by hard, sharp words? And to what degree were you able to kind of live through and beyond it? Maybe writing a poem about it is a good way to deal with it, right? Thank you.